Hi everyone. So we were discussing Panchayati Raj institutions in India and we already have delivered 2 lectures on the Panchayati Raj institution. So this is going to be the third video in series of our discussion on Panchayati Raj. So Panchayati Raj, if you remember from the first video, Panchayati Raj is in part 9 of Indian Constitution. So in first video, if you remember, we discussed the evolution of Panchayati Raj institutions in India. We started from ancient time, then we jumped to the British time, and thereafter in the post-independent India, we discussed various committees and commissions recommendations. So we had discussed in length about the Balwant Rai Mehta committee, Ashok Mehta committee, G.V.K. Rao committee, L.M. Singhvi committee, Gadgil committee, Thangan committee, C. Hanumantha Rao. So their recommendation we studied in the detail. In the second video, if you remember, we had discussed all the articles dealing with this 73rd constitutional amendment that deals with this Panchayati Raj institution, articles starting from article 243A to article 243O. So all those things in the second video we already have discussed. So around 2 hours and 40 minutes we already have spent in the first video, and this is going to be the third video. So let us see what is going to be the scope of this video. Even before seeing the scope of this video, let us understand that this video is not going to be like the previous two videos where you had these linkages and conceptual clarity. The two topic that we have chosen for this particular video is going to be very factual. So it is your role is going to be very important. As far as analytical portion is concerned, I'll do the analysis, but as I already told you that this topic is going to be these two topics. So the topic that we have chosen for these two videos is items in the 11th schedule. So there are 29 functional items that is supposed to be transferred from. So 73rd constitutional amendment has envisioned, and mind you, I am saying envisioned. So there are 29 items that has been placed in 11th schedule, and that is supposed to be transferred from state subject. So see, until this arrival of Panchayati Raj institution in constitutional format, I am saying in constitutional format because even before this 1992 you had the existence of Panchayati Raj institution in various states that we had seen in the first video itself, right? But before this 1992, it was the state which was primarily taking care, state which was primarily, and when I am saying state here, it is not the state as in part 3, that is in fundamental right and DPSP, right? It is the states like Madhya Pradesh or Tamil Nadu or regular states like. So it was until 1992, it was the state which was taking care of all the developmental function and all the policies function. But in 1992, with this passage of 73rd constitutional amendment, you had this 11th schedule, and in 11th schedule there were 29 items like library, like entertainment, like agriculture, land improvements, all those things. What are those 29 items? Fisheries, dairies, right? All those things we'll see when we'll get into this 11th schedule. So these items had been put into 11th schedule, and states were nudged that you should move these items. These items are those light items which can be taken care by Panchayati Raj institution, district council, these intermediate level panchayat or village panchayat. So that can be taken, these 29 items can be taken care by these Panchayati Raj institution. And even if it cannot be taken care, right, what state should do is that you should empower your Panchayati Raj institution in a way that if 2 or 4 functions are little heavy, right, issues like health, issues like education. So in educational sector, yes, means upkeep and all those things these Panchayati Raj institutions can do. As far as appointment of teacher or appointment of doctor in health institutions is concerned, that cannot be done by these Panchayati Raj institution because they were not so empowered, right? So on those functions, right, what state were asked to or state was suggested to do is that, okay, in those areas you can empower the state, right? So the first item will be that those 29 items will look into, or rather 4 or 5 items will look into, and for the rest I'll have to simply say that you can remember all those things. So that is going to be the second topic. The first topic is going to be Panchayat Extension in Schedule Area 1996. So this in short format we'll keep referring it as PESA, and this is how it is known in political circles PESA. PESA is nothing, Panchayat Extension in Schedule Area. What is this schedule area? You will know when we'll study this fifth schedule, but we'll have a brief discussion on the schedule area. So there are 10 states in India which does have certain amount of certain pockets of schedule area. So we'll see that. But as I already told you that as part of detailed discussion we'll have on the schedule area when we'll have a discussion on fifth schedule that has a dedicated chapter, right? So we'll discuss what is this Panchayat Extension in Scheduled Area Act 1996, which is popularly called PESA Act, right? So why this PESA came into existence, right? What are the provisions of this PESA 1996? So that is going to be the first topic, and the second topic, as I already told you, is going to be the 11th schedule or the item in the 11th schedule. So these provisions, the factual point that I was citing, that this chapter is going to be little factual, it was on these grounds. So provision that you will see, so there are 14 or 15 provision that we do have, and these 14, and you need not to take much load that how will we remember these 14 and 15 provision. These 14 15 provision are very simple. If you have seen those special provision for certain states that we had covered in the previous video prior to this Panchayati Raj, we had that chapter on special provision for certain state that was covering this article 371, right? So if you have seen those videos, right, and if you know the importance of that particular video, if you have gone through that video, remembering these 14 or 15 items is not going to be very difficult for you. As far as 29 items in it, so all those 29 items you need not to remember, right? Just you need to have a glance through that. Okay, these are the items that 73rd constitutional amendment had envisioned for about the transfer from state to these PRIs, Panchayati Raj institutions. So again I am telling you that if you have gone through that video on the special provision for certain states, right, so remembering these 14 or 15 points won't be difficult for you. As far as the 29 items in this 11th schedule is going to be concerned, right? So those all 29 items, one or two go through along these 29 items, right, and you would be easily remembering those things. So in the last leg, that is the third leg, we'll have 3 MCQ that I'll expect you to attempt. So with this, we are entering into the first leg of this video, that is what is this PESA, Panchayati Raj Extension to the Scheduled Area Act 1996. Now the question that arises, that what is this necessity? In 1993 itself, you had this passage of 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, which had created these Panchayati Raj institutions, right? So what is this sudden necessity of passing or having one similar act, right? When we'll see the objective of Panchayati, this PESA, Panchayat Extension to the Scheduled Area Act, right, you will find that provisions of this act is similar to that 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act or Panchayati Raj Act, right? Because this act is also going to talk about similar kind of local self-government, right? Local self-government to certain classes. What kind of classes? We'll discuss that in this video itself, right? So the question that should arise is that what is this? When you had this previous act, that was 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act or Panchayati Raj Act, which was dealing with the local self-government, right? What is this sudden necessity of passing a similar act, right, which will have almost similar provision just 3 years down the line or 4 years down the line? So the answer lies that the cliently that this 73rd Constitutional Amendment, just a moment. So the answer lies in the fact that the cliently, this 73rd, or the people that this 73rd amendment, constitutional amendment is going to serve is going to be different than the people that will be served by this Panchayat Extension to the Scheduled Area Act 1996. Now what people this will serve and what people this will serve. So let us try to understand, right? So this will be serving this provisions of Panchayati Raj Extension, provisions of this Panchayati Raj Act that was passed in 1992, that will be serving the general people, right? And this extension, this PESA Act will be the provisions of this PESA Act will be applied to the scheduled 5 area. What is this schedule 5 area? We'll have to understand. Although we do have this separate chapter on schedule 5 and schedule 6, that what is the difference between schedule 5, what are why this schedule 5 was created into Indian constitution, what is the scope. So we'll have a dedicated chapter, but for the purpose of this chapter, let us have a brief understanding, right? So as I already told you that the provisions of this PESA Act will be applied on the people residing into the schedule 5. So first you will have to understand that what is this schedule 5 and why this schedule 5 has been created. So you have this 645 tribal community across India that is residing in villages of different states, right? The population of this tribal community is not concentrated in a particular state, it is spread over the states, right? So you have these 10 states that has been recognized under this schedule 5, right? So it is these tribal people. So as I already told you when we were discussing this article 371, we already have discussed that these people, tribal people, does have, because of their unique culture, because of their unique language that they use, because of their unique socio-cultural practices, because of their unique administration of criminal justice system or civil justice system, because of their unique all these things, right? They have this special requirement, and the normal application or the general application of 73rd constitutional the provision of this 73rd constitutional amendment cannot be applied as such, right? That's why these provisions will have to be modified, and then only these provisions can be applied because of their special requirement, right? You cannot subject these people, tribal community people, right, to the similar application or similar application of the same provision that we do have in this 73rd constitutional amendment. What are those 10 states into the schedule 5? So we can have a look on those 10 states. So these are the 10 states. You have 3 states on the western coast, right? So what are those 3 states? So 3 states are Rajasthan, Gujarat and Maharashtra. 2 states on the eastern coast, that is Odisha and Andhra Pradesh. Then 4 states into the central India, start from south. So you have Telangana, you have Chhattisgarh, you have Jharkhand and you have Madhya Pradesh. So 3 states here, 1 state here, 4 into the central India and 1 into the northern India. So all these 3, 4, 7, 8 and 9, right? Sorry, 2 states here, right? So 3, 4, 7 to 9, 1, 10, right? So there are 10 states which has been put under schedule 5 category, right? And over these 10 states you will have application of this PESA Act, right? And when I am saying over these 10 states you will have application of this PESA Act or the provisions of this PESA Act, it is not over the entire of these 10 states will not be subjected to the provisions of this PESA Act. Rather, there will be habitation, there will be certain villages, right, 3 or 4 villages which will be clubbed together, right? And over those 3 pocket, right? So suppose in Madhya Pradesh example if I say, right, so on the eastern side there are suppose 3 or 4 villages in a particular district called Satna or any district for that matter, or Ujjain or any district, right? So suppose there are 3 or 4 villages which is being dominated or where the tribal population is very large. So those 3 or 4 villages, right, combination of those 3 villages will be recognized under the schedule 5, right? So here you have the schedule 5 in this state, then there would be 2 villages in another district, right? So the application of this PESA Act, the provisions, whatever provision that we'll discuss, so the provision of this PESA Act will not have application over entire Madhya Pradesh, but rather only over these 2 pockets, right? Because only these 2 pockets has been constitutionally been falling under this schedule 5, right? I hope you will have understood. Similarly, with the Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan and other 10 states that you do have, right? So one clarity that you need to have is that this PESA's provision will not be applied over the entire states, right? Rather other areas, whatever other area, leftover area, right, over those area you will have application of normal Panchayati Raj Act that had been provisions of Panchayati Raj Act that has been passed in 1992. So one differentiation I hope you will have clarity on, right? If you want to see another reasons that why this PESA had been enacted, right? So it is nothing but, as I already discussed, that it is in recognition of these things, right? It is in recognition of their distinct culture and language. It is in recognition of their distinct socio-economic condition or socio-cultural condition, because of they have unique identity, because they are untouched from the mainstream. There are, means, not all the 645 tribes are completely untouched from the mainstream, but there are many tribes which are completely, they still practice this barter system. They still indulge in the hunting for their food. They are still food gatherers, right? There are communities, right? If you remember that Andaman Nicobar story, 1.5 year back, you had this American citizen who was killed, right? So if you have been keeping update with the current affair, you would be knowing that they do have their own customary laws on the marriages, on the divorce, on the social justice system, on the how the administration of justice will happen. So recognizing these special needs, right, along with this PESA, you have this article 370, you have this separate ministry that has been created to take care their interests, Ministry of Tribal Affairs. Then you have this 5th and 6th schedule, right? How these 5th and 6th schedule does protect the rights of tribal people. We'll have a discussion on when we'll have a dedicated chapter on this 5th and 6th schedule. Then provisions of Forest Right Act, you would already have studied in economics, right? If you have not read it, in environment as well, it does have, right? So if you have not read this particular act, right, go and do read it, that what kind of protection that it does have, what kind of land ceiling, right, it does have, the provision does have in this Forest Right Act, right? So I hope why aspect, that why PESA had been passed, right, you would have clarity on. Now we are delving into the provisions of this act, that what are the provisions of PESA Act, PESA 1996. Now the first provision, if you can read on the screen, all the state legislations, all the laws that state is passing, that should be in consonance with the social practices, with the religious practices or their belief or their customary practices that they are practicing, right? So all the state legislation. Now the point arises that why all the, when their population, so if I talk about that Madhya Pradesh example, if their population is limited only to certain hamlets, right, why all the state legislation should be built in consonance with their social values or their distinctive culture. So mind you, again I am telling you that when we'll have a discussion on this 5th and 6th schedule, with there will, but as far as this chapter is concerned, let me tell you that unless, if any of the state legislation is violating their this customary laws or social or religious practices, let me warn you that those state legislation or even the parliamentary legislation which is in violation of these things, right, they will not have implementation over these areas. Or if implementation of that parliamentary laws or state legislation has to happen in these areas, the laws which are in violation of the religious practices of the tribal community, or the laws which are in violation of the customary practice, or the laws which are in violation of their social laws, right, they will be amended, then only they will have application over that particular area, right? So it is as strong, their right has been strengthened in that manner, into that strength, right? So that is the first provision of this act. The second provision is that every village shall have a Gram Sabha. So that is the provision of 73rd constitutional amendment, right? So every village shall have a Gram Sabha consisting of person registered in the voter roll of that village. So here the village that it is talking about, it is village belonging to the tribal community in that particular state, right? So all the villages which is being resided by this tribal community, right, that will be registered as Gram Sabha. And who will be the members of this Gram Sabha? So the similar provision that we had in 73rd. So all the members who are above 18 years and does hold voter ID card. So these are the two provisions. There are other provisions as well, as I already told you initially that there are 15 or 16 provisions of this act, right? So there are other provisions. Let us discuss the other provisions of this act, right? So these are the provision, and this is not how Lakshmikant has put up, but for your convenience I have put up it in short format. So there are certain rights or there are certain provision that will be looked after by Gram Sabha. This GS is nothing, Gram Sabha. Then there are certain resources of that community or these tribal community generally lives around jungles, they generally lives around the forest, right? So they will have access to the minor forest. If you go to the Odisha, right, in Odisha, most of these people, most of the tribal community is concentrated into the hill areas, right? And in hill areas you will have mineral resources, right? Then you have because they reside into the hilly areas, so you will have these water streams as well flowing from these areas. Then, as I already told you, that they reside into the certain community of tribal people, right, does reside into this jungle as well. So there will be in jungle as well, you have these timber resources, you have various kind of biodiversity that you would have read in environment, right? Now who will have access over these timber resources, who will have access over these minor forest elements, right? Who will have access or who will have rights over these mineral items, who will have these regulation over these water stream, right? So that has been discussed here, right? So let us discuss these one by one, right? So the duty, it will be the duty of Gram Sabha, right, to safeguard and preserve tradition, customs, culture and community resource. So it will be duty of Gram Sabha, right? Now second point, so certificate of fund utilization will be issued by Gram Sabha. Let us try to understand that what is this certificate of fund utilization. So there are various government schemes that is implemented in these tribal dominant. There are tribal specific scheme that we do have, right? So those scheme will be implemented into villages of the tribal community. So let us talk about one scheme called Prime Minister Awas Yojana. So that has been implemented into these any of the Gram Sabha or any of the villages, right? So suppose district panchayat was the implementing authority, district panchayat, refer it as DP. So district panchayat was the implementing authority of this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Now whether how much fund has been utilized, how many houses were built, right? So this district panchayat will require a certificate that how much fund has been utilized, and that certificate will be awarded to this district panchayat by the Gram Sabha. I hope that second point. Now beneficiary identification. So beneficiary identification will also be done by the Gram Sabha, right? So in the similar example, you had this district panchayat which was implementing authority for this Prime Minister Awas Yojana. Now who should get, right? So it does have a scheme like, suppose if I take an imaginary example, that people earning below 5 lakhs, right, below 5 lakhs will be eligible beneficiary, right, for this Prime Minister Awas Yojana. Now who will identify in this village or in this Gram Sabha that a particular, who are the people who are going to be beneficiary of this Prime Minister Awas Yojana? So that will also be done by the Gram Sabha and not by the village panchayat or the district panchayat. So that right belongs to the Gram Sabha. Then granting any kind of concession for the exploitation of any resource. So as I already told you that these people does reside into the hilly areas, and there is high possibility, rather many of the minerals are found into this, when you will study this geography and when you will see the location where these minerals are being found. So in Odisha you have this Balangir, you have this Kalahandi region, although the people, or Niyamgiri, right, so there many of the minerals are found into these hilly areas itself, right? Most of the minerals, right, will be found under these hilly areas itself. So granting the concession for exploitation of any resource, that will be done by the Gram Sabha, right? Over the water bodies, right, how these water bodies or streams flowing in from the area which is dominated by these tribal people, or from the area if they are again residing into that hilly area, and from that hilly area there is some stream flowing down the line, right? So how that will be used, whether that stretch of 100 kilometer or 50 kilometer that belongs to this tribal community, how that will be so all those regulation on that water body will be done by panchayat. So here not the Gram Sabha but the panchayat at the appropriate level, right? So that will be decided by the state legislature, that which level panchayat, when I am talking about this panchayat at the appropriate level. So as I already told you that you do have this panchayat at 3 level: district level, intermediate level and village level, right? So which level of panchayat will regulate, either this district level or intermediate level or village panchayat will regulate this water bodies, right, that will be decided by the state legislature, but that will be done by the any of the layers of this panchayat. Next, project or mineral extraction license. So if you have any kind of industrial group that wants to establish its location or that wants to do any kind of extraction in that particular area, so that decision cannot be taken by the chief minister, although means in practice, if I talk about, all these decisions are taken by the council of minister or the upper level. But if I talk about the principle, if I talk about what you have to write, what is supposed to be or what is constitutionally right, so it is this thing, and this thing is that if any kind of project is to be established in any of the tribal dominated area which belongs to this 5th schedule area, in that case panchayat has to have approved that project or that industrial company location only when the panchayat has approved that yes, this industrial development or industrial company can establish itself in a particular area, only then they can be established. Now which panchayat? Because panchayat you have at 3 layers: district, intermediate and village level. So that will be decided, means pre-decided, not at a time, right? It will be pre-decided by the Panchayati Raj Act. Every state does have this Panchayati Raj Act. Now every state would have already beforehand declared that if there is any such request from any industrialist popping up, right, so in that case whether district panchayat is empowered or intermediate panchayat is empowered or village panchayat is empowered to take the decision. So suppose a particular state act dictates that it is the intermediate panchayat which will give approval for the mineral extraction or license for mineral extraction or project for the establishment of any industrial building, right? So then in that case it is the intermediate panchayat whose permission will be required, right? Next, land acquisition. So if any land has to be acquired and those land belong to these tribal people, in that case that decision or the approval will be given either by the Gram Sabha or Panchayat at the appropriate level, and this appropriate level has been used very wisely or very cleverly by many states. So various state does have their Panchayati Raj Acts, right? And in Panchayati Raj Act, most of the time these power, such kind of power where this word has been written appropriate level, right? These power has been extended not to the intermediate panchayat or not to the village panchayat but to the district panchayat, because in district panchayat you have this presence of influential people who does have, because if you delegate these kind of power to the village panchayat, because these village panchayat are rooted into the or they come from these Gram Sabha, they do come from these villages, so most of the time their decision will be influenced by the interest of villages, while as you go away from these people, right, your decision or likelihood of your decision getting influenced by the other factors other than the people, right, will be very high, right? And that's why most of the time whenever any sensitive decision is to be taken or in such matters of land acquisition, right, these rights by the state has been extended to the district panchayat and not to the village panchayat, because obtaining the approval from approval for any kind of industrial project, for any kind of mineral extraction, so approval from the village panchayat will be very difficult, because these people from this village panchayat resides very closer to the people of Gram Sabha, right? So the likelihood of they giving any kind of approval for such projects, right, will be very low. I hope at this point you will have clarity on. Next, power to enforce regulation and prohibition of sale of intoxicants. So what are these intoxicants? So it may be any kind of drug, it can be marijuana, it can be bhang, or it can be any kind of alcohol. So those kind of power, whether those should be sold in a particular area or not, that will belong to the Gram Sabha as well or Panchayat at the appropriate level, right? And as I already told you that this word Panchayat at the appropriate level has been used very cleverly by various states. Over the minor forest, right? What kind of minor forest? What are the elements that does fall under this minor forest? So you have these non-timber products like bamboo, right, fruits, roots, and these wood collection, all those things will fall under this minor forest category. Now the ownership of this minor forest will be decided by Gram Sabha or again Panchayat at the appropriate level. Managing these village markets, right? So कौन से seller इस village market में sell करेंगे, right? What fee they'll be paying, on what particular day this market will sell the product. So all those things will belong, all those power will belong to either to the Gram Sabha or the Panchayat at the appropriate level. Then you have this money lending activities. So money lending activities can be within this tribal community as well and can be from outsiders as well. So many a time it has been seen कि outsiders जो हैं in कम्युनिटीज़ को बहुत बहुत हाई रेट्स पे ये मनी लेंडिंग करते हैं. तो दैट मनी लेंडिंग एक्टिविटीज़ टू दिस एसटी शेड्यूल्ड ट्राइबल ग्रुप, राइट, दैट विल आल्सो बिलोंग टू द ग्राम सभा और पंचायत, दैट विल बी रेगुलेटेड आइदर बाय द ग्राम सभा और पंचायत एट द एप्रोप्रिएट लेवल. सो दीज वर सर्टन प्रोविजंस ऑफ PESA Act 1996. There are certain other provisions regarding this reservation. So let us see what are the. So these two provisions deal with the reservation into the PESA Act 1996. So if you remember when we were discussing this 73rd constitutional amendment, you had this reservation for SC community, ST community and women. There was option of, and I am saying option of reservation to the OBC community as well, but that was entirely dependent on the state legislature whether they want to give any kind of reservation to the OBC community or not, right? As far as SC community, ST community and women was concerned, there was fixed, right, reservation that okay, in proportion to the population of SC and ST you have to extend the reservation. As far as women was concerned, you had this 1/3, so that was fixed. But here into the PESA, because here the emphasis is tribal community, right? So here to the SC community and women, right, the reservation has been given, and what amount of reservation this SC community in these areas will get. So again the provision will remain same, that whatever percentage of population that this SC community does have, right, in that proportion they will get the reservation. As far as women is concerned, women will also get 1/3 of the representation or 1/3 of the seats at all three levels, district level, intermediate level or panchayat level, right? All at all these three levels into that scheduled area, right, women will have 1/3 of the reservation, right? So with respect to SC and women, you have similar provisions as we had in 73rd constitutional amendment. But while extending reservation to the SC and women, 1/3 to the women and SC in tune of proportion to the population that do have, while extending the reservation to these two communities or SC and women, you should ensure, or the state legislature should ensure, that half of the seat of all the seats at all three levels must be reserved for the tribal people. So it can't happen. So suppose at district level you have these 56 members, right? So at least 28 seat will remain reserved for the tribal people, right? Because this is a tribal dominating district, right? So that is the one caution that has to be taken. The second caution is that if any particular tribal community, in opinion of the state government, so suppose at the district you have at three levels you have this panchayat. Now in the opinion of the state government, if any particular tribal community is not adequately represented at the district level or intermediate level, then state government can nominate members from that particular tribal community at the district level and at intermediate level, not at the village level. Why this provision has been inserted? Because see, even among these tribal community you have different ethnicities, right? In particular 2 or 3 villages or 10 villages, suppose say, which has been put up under the schedule 5 area, you may have one or two tribal community residing in that particular area, which may not have numerically very large, right? If their numerical strength is low, they might not get representation at intermediate level or district level. In that case, it will be incumbent on the state government to ensure that they do get representation at the district or intermediate level, even if it is by process of nomination, right? I hope that point you will have clarity on. But one thing that state government must ensure, that the nominated seat at the district level and intermediate level must not exceed 1/10 of the total number of seat at the district or intermediate level. I hope. So this was all about the provisions of the PESA, right? PESA, Panchayat Extension to the Scheduled Area Act 1996. Now we are moving to the next leg of this video that deals with the 11th schedule. So as I already told you that the 11th schedule is nothing but it does have 29 items that were supposed to be until 1992. All these functions that you can see on this slide or the next slide, right? So all these functions were being performed until 1992 by the state government, various state governments. So as I already told you that there are 29 items into the 11th schedule, and all these 29 items into the 11th schedule that is falling under this slide and this slide. So there are two slides that has been dedicated for this 11th schedule, right? So whatever item that we'll discuss, right? So whatever item that is falling under this 29 items there are, right? So whatever item that is falling in this 11th schedule, in all those areas it was the state which was until 1992, until this arrival of this Panchayati Raj Act, it was the state which was performing, be it in social forestry, be it in agriculture, be it in land improvement, be it in safe drinking water, be it in library, be it in entertainment. So all those items that I cited, right? Along with all those items there are other items like rural housing, then this animal husbandry, dairy, poultry. All these functions were being performed by or traditional energy, right? Traditional energy sources. All these functions were being performed by the state. But with this arrival of 73rd constitutional amendment, constitution envisioned, and mind you, I am choosing my word very carefully, that the constitution or this act envisioned that all these functions should be, or all these 29 items, on these 29 items state should set its responsibility and these subjects should be transferred to the Panchayati Raj institution, and Panchayati Raj institution should take care of all these functions. And in lieu of all these function or responsibility that is being transferred, right, states should transfer equivalent amount of funds, or they should empower these agency or Panchayati Raj institution to the extent that they should not depend on the state. So either you empower them, or while you are empowering them, while they are in infant stage, while they are in maturing stage, right, along with their resources, you should augment their resources with the consolidated fund of, means there should be transfer from the consolidated fund of state to either in constitutional form or in form of grant in act. So what are those 29 items? We can see that one by one, although most of the things I already have cited. So these are agriculture, including agriculture expansion, land. So all these things are very factual. If you could go through just one by one, right, just 2 or 3 times, if you could go through, right, all these items you can remember. And as far as, again, from the exam perspective, and remembering all these things is not necessary, all these 29 items is not necessary, just 1 or 2 glance over all these things would suffice. So these are 29 items. You can simply, you will have this PDF or PPT, whatever, right? So you can have these. So these are 29 items, right? So family welfare, public distribution system, right? All these things you have. With this, we are wrapping up this lecture with the 3 MCQ that I expect you to attempt. So these are 3 MCQ, 1, 2 and 3 MCQ. So these are 3 MCQ that I expect you to attempt. So until we come up with the next lecture, till then, bye bye.